The Japan by River Cruise podcast is made possible by the generosity of our sponsors.
Starbucks Japan is delighted to announce an extension to our wildly popular Praise Our Customers' Language Ability program to all of our customers, irrespective of where they've come from. No longer do you have to speak to us in basic Japanese in order for our staff to praise you when you order. You can now order in any language and our staff will pretend to be impressed. Bonjour, un café s'il vous plaît. フランス語上手. Buongiorno, un doppio espresso per favore. いいね. Starbucks Japan. Strong high street presence. Weak coffee. Faint praise.
Welcome back to Japan by River Cruise. I'm Bobby Judo.
And I'm Ollie Horn.
So on today's show, a legal conflict between a curry shop and a customer who couldn't finish their meal raises the question, exactly how many jokes will I make about how Ollie can't understand the idea of not finishing a meal? This counts as the first one. Also, Ollie's got your River Cruise recommendation. Yeah, Ollie?
Yes, fuck. Sorry, I was eating. This River Cruise recommendation is very good news for those who hate boats, because this week's recommendation is a cruise that can be completed without the burden of getting on a boat or going on water. The Kanbon Pedestrian Tunnel is in Shimanoseki. It's a 780-meter long pedestrian undersea tunnel that travels between Fukuoka and Yamaguchi's prefectural boundaries. At the end of each tunnel, you can get a commemorative stamp. The first stamp says you've been to the longest pedestrian tunnel in the world, and the other says, what was the point in that then?
Plus, a very Japanese compromise has finally been reached between the Sea Forest Waterway, that's the Olympic venue for the rowing and crewing competitions, and the River Cruise company that owns operation rights on that waterway. Per the terms of the agreement, the company has agreed to suspend their river cruises for the duration of the events, but in return, the company's board of executives and all of their elite premium river cruise pass holders will be allowed to compete in the Olympics. But first, Soap Talk.
Bobby Judah, how's your week been?
Well, the coronavirus has officially made it to Fukuoka, so...
Ding, ding, ding!
We did it! Yay! Woohoo! Yeah, no, first official case announced yesterday. I'm sure there's going to be more popping up, and I'm freaking out because I'm supposed to go to the U.S. next week. Judy and the girls they left last Wednesday, and I was actually like concerned about whether or not they were going to get hassled at border control because they're doing border control in Texas. And yeah, like there's not a lot of understanding that Japan is not China. And so
did they get probed at the border?
They made it through. I'm sure they got like temperature scanned, but she said she did get like, you can get a nice person or you can get a jerk. I think she got a jerk, and they were like,
oh, really?
Are you sure you're planning on going back to Japan after you come in? And also like, are you sure you're not from China?
I mean, how would she possibly be able to prove?
Well, I mean, you'd think the passport would help, but no.
Wouldn't it be funny if at that moment the penny dropped? She was like, "Oh, I've got somewhere to be. Oh, I've got a family waiting for me in China. I'm so sorry."
Yeah, no, you're right. I was just confused. Thank you for double checking.
Just holding up the Japanese passport. What, this thing?
And while I'm remembering stuff, by the way, I've got coronavirus.
And these are my children.
But no, now I'm worried that like it's gonna catch on more in Fukuoka, and we might get like Japan might get travel flagged before I get to follow them. So I don't know how that's gonna go. But I've been talking about it with people in Japan, and like everyone's like, well, I mean, aren't like lots of people dying from influenza in America this year? And I was like, are they? And I looked it up, and they are.
Oh,
like,
cool.
This year's
ding,
flu
ding.
season. We did it. They're at 14,000 deaths from influenza and counting. And like a lot of children and a lot of elderly people.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that basically what the deaths in Wuhan have been?
Yeah, no, so that's you remember I talked about this when we first started talking about coronavirus.
Yeah.
It was like the fatality rate from this is basically the same as influenza. And influenza, I guess, is like worse if you don't get vaccinated, apparently.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the other aspect is like it's been embarrassing talking to Japanese people on so many levels because they're like, don't you have like a lot of people dying from influenza in America right now? And I'm like, yeah, that's embarrassing. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, some people don't get vaccinated these days. And they're like, oh, right, because it's so expensive. And I'm like, yes. And like, it's just embarrassing on all levels.
Well, at least in Japan, this virus has created a new way for people to be subtly antisocial and subtly rude. I heard that in Fukuoka, a train was delayed because someone used the emergency stop button. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, so apparently there was a huge fight because somebody was coughing and not conducting proper coughing etiquette, like was not wearing a mask, did not cover their mouth, and somebody else started a fight with them, and they started kind of like having this very heated argument that culminated in somebody pulling the emergency brake.
Right.
Yeah.
And how I wonder how that got resolved. I mean, hopefully not some kind of physical.
I mean, I doubt it.
Further spreading the virus.
Yeah, further spreading the virus through physical contact, and also like somebody is coughing on this train. Let me stop this train in a way that we will not be able to exit for an indeterminate amount of time.
What about masks and things? Has there been panic buying? Because my friends in Hong Kong have said you now can't buy toilet paper only because people have been panic buying.
Yeah, everybody's buying up all the masks. I think a lot of the drugstores are kind of like sold out. I saw our friend Michaela was able to buy some at a convenience store, so they're coming in, but they fly off the shelves as soon as they do.
And just what's it like not having as many tourists from Asia? Because so much of the population of well, certainly downtown Tianjin, is tourists, right? And I'm guessing there aren't as many.
I haven't noticed. I mean, honestly, I've been on shoot in other places around Fukuoka Prefecture for like 3 or 4 days. I've got to like shoot the things that I need for work before I take my break for America. So I've been traveling around a lot, and I haven't been in downtown Fukuoka that much. But I think a lot of people, just in general, are trying to not go out that much. The train, I had to take the train home the other day. It was still packed, and like I put my mask on before. And anytime public transportation, I'm trying to use more masks. It's funny also because Yuri and the girls going back to America, they flew from Fukuoka to Narita and masked the whole way. And then boarding the plane in Narita, they had their masks on. And then like getting off in the States, they were like, let's hide our masks so no one's suspicious of us.
Yeah, right.
It has the opposite effect there.
But I guess there is a bit of a balancing act with a mask, right? Because some masks aren't supposed to be effective anyway. They're only effective to not let the virus get out if you've got it. And there's a certain inconvenience. I mean, how do you yourself balance the kind of personal safety of wearing a mask versus the downsides of covering your face so you're less likely to get recognized?
Yeah. You have to choose. You really do. Have you ever had the experience of like you're overseas and you see a Japanese person or you see somebody speaking, you're outside of Japan and you see somebody speaking Japanese, and inside your own mind, you're like, oh, I have a connection to this person because I live there and I speak the language. And you like try to make eye contact or like act like you have a sense that you know each other, but the person on the other end has no idea why.
Exactly. And you have that feeling of, well, if only they knew. Yeah.
That's how it is when I'm wearing a mask. Like, okay. I'm still on the train, like making eye contact, like you probably still know it's me, right?
This reminds me. I had exactly that when I was in a very small French town while I was going skiing, which I think I mentioned on the podcast because this was the skiing trip that was recommended by my physiotherapist to get well, and I ended up coming back.
It sounds like a horrible physiotherapist. Been having some spine trouble, right? How about you go downhill skiing?
Well, that's what I did, and exactly this happened. That this Japanese kid, he must have been maybe 4 or 5 years old, was shouting, calling his mum, and kind of her mum was kind of stood by me, so came over. And I kind of struck up conversation because there was no foreigners on this resort. Everyone was French, right? It was like rare to see even other English people on the resort. I think I met one American family and then this Japanese couple out of nowhere. So I asked them, I said, do you live here? Because that really could be the only explanation as to why they were there. It wasn't that much of a tourist resort. And she said, oh no, but my husband's posted in Switzerland. He works for a Japanese company there. And she responded to me in Japanese. And then her husband came along, and her husband worked for Sony in the intellectual property and trademarks department, which listeners of the show know that I don't speak much Japanese. But let me tell you, my intellectual property and trademark vocab is shit hot. So
That's your wheelhouse.
Rather than doing what I should have done, which is not mention that I speak Japanese and just have the have a general conversation in English. Instead, what I decided to do was not mention that I know anything about trademark, nor have studied trademark laws, and made it seem like I, a random foreigner, was on the drop of a hat able to have an in-depth conversation about his work in international trademarks. And he was just so taken back by like all of this really technical stuff. And also, I know a lot about Sony because I actually turned down an intern. This is about 5 years ago now. But I turned down an internship with Sony. And so I even know like where all the different offices are that deal with this kind of thing. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. You chose this office rather than this one. And at no point did he go, how do you know this? He just thought, well, this is foreigners abroad must. Well, anyway, I'm glad you're safe. I hope that you don't get stranded in America. I hope you can come back to Japan.
I doubt that'll be a problem because, I mean, America has no problem getting rid of people that they don't want there. They don't care where you go once you're gone.
Good. Yep. What's in the news this week? Let's do the news.
No, we got mail.
We got mail.
Yeah, we got mail.
We didn't have. I thought we didn't have mail. Now we got mail.
We got mail.
Let me guess.
Let's look at our messages.
Did Brian have a complaint?
Brian in Fukuoka, in parentheses, your only listener apparently, has written, hats off to you for finally having a female voice on the pod, and extra kudos to Ollie for actually allowing her to speak. So bummed that you guys are changing from Japan by river cruise to Korea by river cruise. Hey, I guess you have to change with the times, and as you correctly conveyed, Japan is dead.
Okay.
I mean, let's look at a message from another listener. Fuck you, Brian. This message is from a Brian named Marta. Marta writes, hello, Ollie and Bobby. I'm very pleased that the podcast is back. Will you have more guests for Ollie to interrupt in the future? It was nice to have an extra perspective. Marta XX. So yeah, I'd like to just reference.
Thanks, Marta. I think I know who this is.
Both of these messages are in reference to you bullying and kind of like interrupting and jumping in our guest last week, Sophie. And to be fair to you, it was a bit. And to be fair to everyone else, it was not a good bit.
And what's astonishing is I end up editing this podcast and I could have edited all that out, but I opted not to. At least this can't be put down to me being a bully in the spur of the moment. At least this is considered.
Well, I think this is something that you can work on in the future. You let other people talk.
Shut up, Bobby. Let's do the news. It's a big old week in the news, but the story that's most important is curry restaurants may have the legal right to stop you from ordering too much food if you don't plan to eat it.
Okay, break this down for us.
A university student called Kenta went to a curry rice restaurant and ordered the large rice. And it's pretty common in Japan. If you want to order a large, like you can basically normally get large rice for free, right?
A lot of places will give you omori for free. Some will charge extra, but yeah.
Yeah, he asked for large rice, didn't finish his rice, and then the owner said, well, if you're not going to finish it, I don't want customers like you coming here, and then banned him from the restaurant. And so this now created a legal debate, right? Is this restaurant owner allowed to ban someone just because they don't eat foods which they've ordered? Plus, it kind of creates a moral question too, right? Whether he eats the rice or not, it costs them the same. But is he allowed to say to a particular customer, "You're not welcome back because I don't like your attitude"?
Well, I think in the U.S., like restaurants have the right to refuse service to anyone for pretty much any reason, right?
Yeah, and that's also true in Japan as well, right? That as long as you're not doing so in a discriminatory basis, you're allowed to. I mean, it's a private establishment, right? So
yeah, if a customer has been there in the past and they've caused a problem or something like that, then the next time they come, you should have the legal right to say, no, you're not allowed in, right?
Sure, but and in Japan, under the civil code, there's the principle of good faith, which basically says if you enter into a contract with somebody, then that contract has to be executed in a way that's essentially fair and essentially within the scope of expectations of the parties. And so, if the restaurant was to have an unusual policy, then it's the obligation is on the restaurant to let that customer know of that policy before they implement the policy. Otherwise, they're in breach of the civil the kind of civil code's doctrine of good faith.
Okay, so the idea here is that this student did not know ahead of time that if he didn't finish the rice, he would be banned from this restaurant.
Yes, that's precisely
and
that.
So there was no policy that he was aware of, and then all of a sudden, from his point of view, he's paid for something that now belongs to him. He should be allowed to do with it what he wants, whether eat it or throw it away.
Yes, but the restaurant had a counter argument, which was to say, well, it's not just that we're serving the rice and losing money. It's the fact that we're offering that rice as kind of a gesture of goodwill to our customers, and he's abused that goodwill. Additionally, there's a cost to us to dispose of the rice as well, that like restaurants have to pay for commercial garbage, I guess. And so the lawyer that was kind of quoted in the article, which I found this from, said that if the customer were to actually go through with this ban, and then if the restaurant were to go through this ban, and then the customer were to challenge this ban, it may actually be possible to be upheld. But what a judge would look into is, well, why is he offering this extra serving of large rice, right? Is he offering it as kind of a promotion to customers? That is to say, as like a way of attracting people in, or is he doing so with the actual expectation that customers are going to be finishing this rice because it's hungry? And a restaurant can't just have a promotional tool that they then use arbitrarily against customers just because they don't like their attitude.
Huh.
Like in a textbook, you learn to say the thing that you want and then onegai shimasu. So it's like if you're in a burger restaurant, you would say cheese a hamburger or onegai shimasu. Oh no, you wouldn't say I'm wrong. You just say cheese a hamburger onegai shimasu.
You'd have to say, or as most people would refer to a cheese hamburger, a cheeseburger.
Okay, so I've got that one wrong as well. Right, let's reset. You would say cheeseburger or hitotsu onegai shimasu, right?
You could,
and
yeah.
So that's like this kind of set expression. I guess I just got in a habit in Japan of that onegai shimasu just became omori de onegai shimasu, and the omori de was just like an extra bit of grammar that seeped into my language, irrespective of where I was or how hungry I actually was.
Yeah, it was just your default go-to.
Yeah, omori. I like the way that they name things, because you can get omori, which means like the big portion. Yep. Then you get dekamori, which means like dekai, like huge, enormous portion.
That's got to be restaurant specific, though.
I've seen dekamori. Well, maybe it's the restaurants I frequent, but I've seen dekamori quite a lot.
Grammatically, it makes sense, but I don't think most restaurants offer that. And we can edit this bit out if you want, but I just want to point out that you gave me a lot of shit for picking my nose on webcam the other day, and you've been doing this whole podcast with a toothpick picking your teeth every time I start talking.
Yeah, I'm thinking about. I want my teeth to be clean for the listeners. I absolutely one of the principal policies of Japan by River Cruise is we are fighting tooth decay. Allow me to just take a sip of my carbonated beverage while you talk about.
I think we should just save this whole conversation and this whole part of the conversation for our sixth podcast. Tooth decay is one of the leading problems globally today, and we'd like to do everything we can to eradicate tooth decay related problems.
.com.
And don't be confused. Don't be confused, because it is .com. You gotta put the
It's actually the .com is a subdomain.
Yeah, if you only put one .com, you go to a weird tooth fetish porn site, which we also run.
But anyway, going back to this story, I have noticed a difference between the way that restaurants are run in Japan and other places. That owners seem to have a bit more dominion of the place, right? Maybe this is an observation that you've had too, but
Mm.
often restaurants are smaller. It's far more common to have an independently owned or family run restaurant. Sometimes these restaurants are even kind of part of that person's house, right? It's not uncommon for someone to live above or behind their restaurant. I particularly where I used to live in a pretty old-fashioned part of Fukuoka in Hakozaki, a lot of the restaurants were like one room, which maybe held,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, 15 people. Do you think that the rules are different when you go into a Japanese restaurant, and it's not just like you're buying the food, but you kind of have to adopt the customs and rules of the owner?
I think it depends a lot on the restaurant. I don't want listeners who aren't that familiar to think that there aren't chain restaurants in Japan, because there's tons of chains. But you are right
Yeah.
that I think it's a lot more common. I think there are a lot more restaurants just in general. Like the amount of restaurants that are sustainable for the population numbers it always seems like astronomical to me. There are so many
Yeah.
restaurants that can stay in business. Maybe part of that is because like they run them out of a house or something like that. But no, I think there are two different kinds. There tends to be the customer service oriented okyakusama wa kami-sama, which means the customer is God. It's the Japanese version of the customer is always right. Um, Again, when we're talking about like these independently owned and run restaurants, it can either be okyakusama wa kami-sama, which they cater to everything that the customer wants, or it can be like ganko mono. Ganko is what you call like a very stubborn person.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of like gruff taisho, the owner or the chef who kind of is like the soup Nazi from Seinfeld. Like, I'm going to serve it this way. This is how you're going to have it. You leave everything up to me. I think you can find both. I think at chain restaurants, they do tend to be, they have great service until you need something that's not something that they're used to doing. And then they don't know how to operate outside of the rules. And I think that ties into this idea of like ordering omori, or even like gohan sukuname, shomori. So there's shomori, which is just a little bit. There's futsumori, which is the usual portion. There's omori, which is large portion. And then you go to restaurants that serve dekamori.
I didn't know that shomori was a thing.
You can say shomori, or you can say gohan sukuname.
I thought that was just one of those things like the female orgasm that only kind of exists in mythology or stories.
That's a whole other issue that you could probably delve into. I could send you some links. But there's this big movement right now in Japan about stop shoku loss, stop food loss. And I think one of the things that a lot of times Westerners are drawn to in Japan is the idea of the mottainai spirit. The idea of not wasting things. And
this is called shokuji no muda, I think they call it. Food waste.
Shoku no muda or shoku no muda kana. Recently they are calling it shoku loss, like loss.
Right.
Food loss.
Right.
Which, one of the paradoxes that a lot of people notice in Japan is that they talk so much about the mottainai spirit, and in the home, people will tell you, there's a God contained in every grain of rice or whatever, like these old, we talked about this on a podcast, didn't we?
I don't not this podcast. I think that was on our other podcast, which is Where is God? Have you found God yet? Is he in your bowl of rice? Could be. Don't forget to brush your teeth.
Well, there's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of crossover between our podcasts. It's hard to keep them straight. But so in the home, you're taught like don't even leave a single grain of rice in your bowl. But then at restaurants, it's so common for people to leave food and waste food, and especially at these big parties where you've got these giant platters, and people will leave them out of manners even if they're still hungry.
Yeah.
And so there's so much food loss at these restaurants.
I'm saying as behavior that I've observed.
I've seen people do this. It makes it a lot easier for me to finish it. I think a lot of foreigners tend to be the people who finish the platters.
Yeah, but it's so funny, isn't it? Because I've seen people in ramen shops where for an extra 100 yen you can get the kaedama, right? And the kaedama is the extra bowl of noodles in your soup.
Refill on your noodles. Yeah,
I've seen a guy go through 8 kaedama, just absolutely just one after the other.
Yeah.
He got to a kind of a rhythm where he was taking his bowl of kaedama, he's taking his bowl of extra noodles while handing over the voucher for the next one simultaneously.
Yeah.
Right, and it was basically like a system they got in place where he managed to eat essentially 8 bowls of noodles within the space of 10-15 minutes. He must do this quite regularly, and he wasn't even a hefty lass. He was a fairly slender chap.
So you're saying that if they wanted to finish the food, they could, and they're
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, without wanting to generalize, but I will be. Japanese people have incredible metabolism, right? Like you've seen Japanese customers at like all you can eat parties, right?
Yeah.
Where they bring out just plates and plates of like fried spring rolls or fried gyoza, and people just they're eating them as if they're peanuts while they're drinking their beer. I think Japanese people have a huge capacity to eat. It's just there are instances where like socially it's not seen.
Yeah.
It's not seen to be polite. But this guy was the opposite problem. His eyes were bigger than his belly.
Right. You're talking about the curry guy again, right?
Yeah.
Was there anything in the article that referenced the idea of like that the owner was mad because this was food waste?
Not that I could understand. I mean, the article was in Japanese, so good luck me. All he said was, "I don't want customers like you to come here," and so I guess customers like you would mean people who, people who waste food. I guess from the restaurateur's point of view, it's just a discourtesy. But then again,
Yeah, there's
I
something culturally insulting about like ordering food and not finishing it.
But I've had this 2 or 3 times that I've had it in a shop, right, where they've said, "Would you like, you can have the bigger portion for free, right? But the what's it called, kodawari, where you get the an extra bowl is like 100 yen." I remember having this I'm going to say debate, but it was an argument that I lost, where the shop said you can go large now for free, and I said I'm not sure if I want that, but can I get that later if I finish the thing? And they said, oh no, we charge 100 yen for the
Okawari.
Okawari. That's it. That's the word.
Okawari.
Okawari.
Yeah.
Right. So okawari wa 100 yen itadakimasu. And I was like, no, I don't want okawari. What I want is like that extra bit of the large portion later. Can I defer my large portion? And they were like, I think you're talking about an okawari, and I think that's going to cost you 100 yen.
Yeah.
And so the restaurants don't necessarily incentivize you to to work out if you want more food after you've finished eating.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was talking about with a lot of the restaurants that have these rules that they don't know how to operate outside of. I have the opposite problem because I'm on a low carb diet, and so a lot of times I'll go in and I'll ask for gohan sukuname, or like sometimes the only thing that I can eat on the menu is like an oyakodon, but I don't want to eat the rice, so I'll ask for it without the rice. And the restaurants.
What's an oyakodon?
Oyakodon is the egg and chicken dish, like chicken.
Oh yeah,
chicken cooked in like dashi and soy sauce, and then they put in scrambled egg to kind of like link it all together, and then they put it on top of rice. And so I'll want like just the topping, and they'll be like, well, we can't do that because we don't have an option for it. And I'm like, well, you could charge me the same thing, but if you give me the rice, I'm going to end up not eating it, and I don't want to do that, so just don't give me the rice. And sometimes they'll say like it'll throw off the balance of the flavor because they tend to make things very shoyu karai, like strong soy sauce flavors that if you eat them without the rice, they taste too strong. They calculate, the final ultimate balance. And so even if you ask for like I go out to eat with a lot of the crews that I work with, and they laugh at me because I'll be like, can I get gohan sukuname? And they're like, yeah, like how much do you want? And I'm like, think of an amount that you think is like way too little, and then give me less. And a lot of times what they end up doing is they'll go, well, I'll just give you the normal amount and just eat what you want, which is the exact opposite of this curry place. It's like, I know I'm going to throw it out. And I think that is that paradoxical, they talk so much about mottainai, but then there's so much food waste. There's so much like plastic waste. The other day, just in terms of waste in general, I'm trying not to use plastic at all or any kind of plastic bags. And so I went into Aeon to buy like a pack of bacon, and the bacon is in a plastic bag. And then inside the plastic bag, it's plastic sealed inside again. So it's already double sealed in plastic. And what they do a lot of times when you buy raw meat is they put that in a little plastic bag and then put it in another plastic bag. And so
in case that meat leaks.
Yeah. Which, it never really does. And then the bacon is also like sealed again inside. So it's not gonna. So I told them I don't need a plastic bag. They had already gotten out one and they were putting it in. And I said, I don't need that plastic bag. And then
They threw it away.
She took the bacon and put it into the mini plastic bag. I was like, no, I don't want that one either. And I gave it back to her. And she goes, oh, okay. And then she threw it away. I was like, watching her put it in the garbage. I'm like, yeah.
Some plastic use is unavoidable. And I am sorry to cross promote, but just like my Braun Oral-B 3000 electric toothbrush, there's nothing like good dental hygiene after a large portion of rice. Thanks for listening to Japan by River Cruise this week. We will be back next week with another episode just before Bobby makes his trip to the States. If you'd like to get in touch with us, then you can do by messaging japanbyrivercruise.com. Go to japanbyrivercruise.com, click on the button, and we reluctantly read all of your messages on air. Thanks for listening. See you next week.